you being with us today. This is our May business meeting. I'm going to ask people to introduce themselves, starting with our council members. Alan, you're with us. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sweet. Let me try and see if we get the camera on here too. I don't know. My camera on this Zoom does not work. I mean, it just does not want to turn on. I'll get it eventually by the time I'm done.
That's right.
Well, good morning, everyone. Alan Armstrong here with the Bureau of Land Management in Billings, Montana. I represent the federal sector of the council.
Thanks, Alan. And Adam, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to break the camera. I don't quite have my hair done yet, so I'll turn it on in a minute. But yeah, Adam Carpenter, Chief Data Officer for the state. Wonderful that I was able to make it this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Maureen Sealander. I'm the GIS manager for Custer County here in eastern Montana, and I represent local government on the committee. And I'm sorry I don't have my camera on, but my bandwidth is a little low this morning, and I don't want to get kicked off. So
We feel ya. I saw Karen. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning. There, my camera works. Karen Coleman. I am a GIS analyst with the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, and on the council representing the state sector.
Great, Karen. Thanks for being here. Don't see Brian. Valentine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Valentine Hoff. I work at the National Center for Landscape Fire Analysis at the University of Montana, and I represent the Montana University system on the council.
Great. Let's see. Do we have Lee? Yeah, Lee. Oop. Looks like she's
morning.
just morning.
Good morning. Lee Mac, excuse me. Lee Macholtz. I'm the GIS manager for the city of Missoula, and I'm a local government representative.
Thanks for being here. Did I miss any council members? Did anybody join that I didn't see? Okay. Erin, you want to introduce yourself?
Morning, everyone. My name is Erin Fashaway. I am the state GIS coordinator and I staff the council.
And then we have a number of staff and guests joining us. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, and thank you for being with us. We have one item of business and then a number of different discussion items for the meeting today. We want to update you on some progress that we're making on the internal review that our agency is conducting into how we have awarded our geospatial information grants over the years. We're going to provide an update on our progress with our geospatial strategic plan, looking specifically about how we improve spatial data value. I'm going to offer a legislative update. There's a bit to talk about when it comes to our federal funding for the state library, and then talk about the progress that we're making on the geospatial information plan. So thanks again for being with us. Again, our one item of business is approval of our minutes from our January 16th meeting. I think that should say 2024, I'm sorry, 25, not 24. So we'll get that corrected in the agenda.
Can you post the materials, please? Can you put those?
Nikki, could you bring up the agenda? Great, perfect. Thank you. Are there any questions or edits to the January 16th minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the January 16th, 2025 minutes?
this is Maureen. I will make a motion to approve the minutes from January 16th, 2025.
Thanks, Maureen. Is there a second?
I
I'll
second.
second.
I think Lee got that one. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you for that. And Sean Anderson has joined us. Sean is our grants and contracts coordinator. I'm going to let him introduce himself to the council and then give you an update on our approach to our internal review of the MGA grants and our progress to date. So Sean, thanks for being with us.
Of course. Like Jenny said, I'm Sean Anderson. I'm the grants and contracts coordinator for the state library. Working with these grants is one of the hats that I wear. And I'm not a GIS specialist. I'm not super involved with the technicalities of that work. But it's been sort of a fun project to get it to work with this and sort of get to be in the periphery of this work that's happening. And so I'm glad to be part of this grant review because I have worked pretty closely with Aaron in the 2 previous grant cycles before this one. I believe we've talked a little bit about this review, but just as a little bit of background, because of the unexpectedly low revenues in the MGA account last year, we decided not to offer a grant program in fiscal 2025. But of course, we weren't just going to leave that alone and leave it as a vacuum. So we decided to take this time to give the grant program sort of a critical review, find opportunities for improvement, and address some sort of long-standing issues that we'd identified, both on the grantee side and on the administrative side, on the state library side. I think Jenny, are you in control of the screen?
Nikki is.
Okay. Nikki, do you have the grants review project document?
Just scroll down, Nikki.
Oh, is it all in the same thing? Yeah, there you go. So this document is sort of the best overview of what this project is intended to do at a high level. When we started looking into the grant program and finding the places that needed improvement, these 6 areas are the places that we wanted to really spend our time focusing. Taking a look at those grant priorities and how we work with those, some big picture budget and finance questions that have been on our minds for quite some time. Obviously, we wanted to get grantee feedback and make sure that any changes that we're implementing are serving the grantees themselves. Grant timing is sort of an overarching topic that affects several facets of the grant program. Obviously, there's never too much outreach and communication that we could be doing, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing that efficiently and meeting the needs of the grantees themselves. And then, of course, how we're managing those grants, because they are staff intensive for our program managers, they're intensive for grantees, and basically we wanted to find ways that we could make the grantees successful while also not making it hugely burdensome on state library staff who are doing the administrative work as well. So each of these priorities have smaller subcommittees associated with them, and those subcommittees have been meeting basically since January, since the last winter, to address and really dig into the details of some of these things. And I mean, in terms of an update, I think this review is basically right on track for what we intended to have. We just met yesterday and sort of brought all those committees back together in one place and give updates. And each of them have already gotten to the point where they've identified measures of success, what specific issues are we trying to solve, and how we measure if we've been successful in addressing them, and have moved into the point where they're starting to identify specific problems and identify specific solutions to those. Obviously, there are a lot of solutions floating around, but there are some sort of obvious low-hanging fruit solutions that I included in that memo at the top of this document. The first of which is something that has already been baked into the administrative rule updates. Having a 2-year grant cycle is sort of an important change, and it solves a lot of issues. It simplifies things like the reporting requirements. It opens up new opportunities to communicate more effectively with grantees. And it, logically halves the administrative burden of soliciting, collecting, reviewing, evaluating applications for these grants, and then the ongoing management of those projects. And then there are opportunities to better delineate boundaries from the technical side of things and the administrative side of things. There's a lot of overlap there, and I think that's a result of Erin sort of being the busiest person in the room at any given time. Her having to wear both the administrative hat and the technical hat concurrently is just sort of setting ourselves up for confusion. And so delegating some of those administrative responsibilities to me and extending that, in ways to our central services team opens up more time for Erin and the technical staff to focus on the technical aspects of these grants, offer better support to grantees, and have these grants not be all encompassing for 6 months out of every year. And I think the big thing that just sort of goes through my mind all the time while we are working on these is just improving our documentation, making sure that we have procedures in place, that we are consistent, that we are communicating the expectations of the grant program to the grantees, making sure that they know what their responsibilities are and that we have ways to treat them consistently. Is something that we haven't done particularly well. And I think just having those procedures in place, not feeling like we're reinventing the wheel every time we get an invoice that needs correction, for example, I think that'll go a long way to just lowering the temperature on these projects. Again, those are just sort of some low-hanging fruit solutions that cover several of these bases all at once. But I'm always happy to answer questions or pull others in to talk about what the nature of those conversations has been, if you're curious about it. In terms of timeline and next steps, I think what you can expect is by the next time this committee meets, it'll just be coming more and more into focus what these solutions are, which ones have risen to the top, and just getting a clearer and clearer picture of what this grant program will look like when we open it up again. And the idea is that the end goal is still the same, that by the end of the first quarter in 2026, we'll have a lot of those, we'll have those procedures in place, we'll have them documented, and basically have a new and improved grant program ready to push out the door as soon as we can. So again, happy to answer any questions. I know this is sort of a high level overview of things. I think that's sort of the idea. And then you can let us know the specific areas you'd like to dig in.
Thanks, Sean. Just one additional point that I wanted to make. You have in your memo the participants in this review. I know Rebecca Camp is with us. She's our state data coordinator, and she has really done the real heavy lift at looking at and evaluating our grant priorities. She's gone back and read all of the past land plan and geospatial plans, calling out the priorities that we had identified for the grant program, and then looking at the grants that were awarded, whether they were completed and how well the completed projects met those deliverables. And she's doing that through a very careful analysis. Rebecca, again, like Sean, is someone that doesn't have a GIS background, although she's learning to use the tools and technology to a great degree to help improve our agency's overall data management, coordination, and reporting. But we really tasked her with coming to this project with no assumptions and with really fresh eyes. And I think that has been a really rewarding part of this process. I'm really looking forward to bringing her in at your next meeting and kind of going through in detail some of the things that she has identified through that process that I think will be of interest to this council, especially those of you who are familiar with obviously drafting the land plan and identifying those grant priorities, and then actually reviewing and awarding the grant applications themselves. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to refine our priorities and help improve the geospatial information plan and then the overall grant program itself. So, looking forward to that.
Jenny, can I jump in here too?
Please, yeah.
Thank you. Sean, thank you. That was an excellent overview. And I see that Alan in the chat says that the grant subcommittee is ready to go. And Sean, we had talked about that, and we thought about bringing it up at this meeting to see when we might want to convene the grant subcommittee prior to the next council meeting to review, though not the next one, the September council meeting to review what we had done. And so I just wanted to bring that up as a possible, and Jenny, to see if you thought it was relevant as well, to have them take a look at everything and have them review it prior to giving it to the council. And so it just had come up in a discussion, and I guess yesterday we just kind of failed to bring it up again in our internal discussion, but it come up 2 meetings ago with Sean and Matt and I. So I wanted, since the council was on the line, just thought, would it be relevant to bring them in sometime this summer?
Definitely. I think that's a great idea. And thanks for your willingness, Alan. Let's plan for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to extend on that, Aaron, that grant management section, that's the area where Aaron and I have the most overlap. The grant review process itself is a pretty important part of it, obviously, and as that subcommittee from this council knows, can be a pretty time-consuming and intensive process. So getting your feedback on ways that we can improve it, and still, be accountable to these dollars is a pretty important part of it. So I'd certainly look forward to getting your feedback later this summer.
And then in addition to the subcommittee, Aaron and Rebecca are going to be interviewing some of our past grant recipients as well to get their feedback to bring to our overall review. Any other questions or comments?
Do you believe I can call on the past subcommittee members? But if anyone who has not been on the subcommittee yet would like to join, just let me know. It would be great.
All right. Sean, thanks for that great overview. Appreciate you being with us. Okay. Erin.
Okay, so can you please click on the MSDI memo, the updates for improving? Thank you. Okay, so we decided to do things a little differently. We're not going to play the video, but there were some folks that weren't going to be able to attend the meeting today. And so we wanted to basically allow for them to give an update. And we're trying to think outside of the box. So we decided to create a series like a lightning talk so that you could watch at your own pace. And then we could use these recordings, just to kind of get the word out and other types of communications about what's going on and so on and so forth. And so first of all, I guess what I can do is just kind of open it up to discuss basically anything that you've heard in these conversations, anything that you want to discuss, and then your, I guess, overall impressions on how we're delivering these updates, and then any kind of overall feedback on the matrices and where we're at in the process. So I think a few of you were able to attend some of these council meetings, or excuse me, some of these framework meetings. Maureen, I know you were on some. I do believe Eric was on a few as well. So if you want to go ahead and give us your overall impressions of how we're doing with the matrices, any kind of feedback on individual themes and or just this process, that would be fantastic.
Hi, Erin, this is Maureen. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not turning my camera on because I don't want to get kicked off because of low bandwidth this morning, but I thought the working group meetings went really well. I really liked the cadastral and mapping controls working group meeting. I like where they might be going with that, with possibly integrating some of the data already collected, possibly from Department of Revenue, with the imagery and stuff that they capture and the data that they capture on each building measurement for the footprint on those buildings. Also in the hydrography group, that was just really telling. They've been doing a lot of good work there too. So, I mean, that was very, very informative because I haven't followed a lot of that hydrography. So that was put together really well. And I'm glad that I was able to attend that.
Maureen.
Thanks, Maureen. Other thoughts or impressions from the matrices or any of the information that staff provided in their updates, their lightning talks? Or any questions about what we're hoping to accomplish through this this particular aspect of our strategic plan?
Hey, Jenny, it's Alan. I feel really stupid here. I must have missed this posting to be able to watch these. So my apologies. To me, it seems like a great idea. If we can showcase these, with the timestamps like that, I think that's awesome. I'll go back and watch them. So I do apologize. Did that get sent out to the council in an email, or was that sent some other MSDI note or something?
I think it was just with the meeting materials.
Okay.
Delivery announcement, Jenny.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Actually, you bring up a really great point. That we believe we have a sneaking suspicion that people are starting to kind of hit ignore on, not saying you did, but the working group meetings. And so what we had discussed was potentially trying to figure out how to actually predefine working group meeting, people in the working groups and define who those are. And I don't know if there's an internal process for us to do that. But if we define those working group members, and I don't know if we want to limit it to like 10 or 15, of course, anybody can attend the meetings, but it could be a way to make sure that the right people are there. The way we had structured it, and we feel like there's some flaws in it, which is good for us to learn, is we had sent the agendas out via Magip and our Gov delivery system. And then it was a self-registration through Zoom, because then we have an understanding of who's going to be there. But if we're not hitting those regular, the usual suspects, our stakeholders, by intentionally inviting them and putting it on their Outlook calendar, we believe that it's, it just is not, the connection isn't happening to attend the meeting. And so that was one of the things that Troy and I had talked about in a follow-up, because he thought that some of his hydro meeting was well attended by the private sector, and he thought he had expected more feds and he had expected more state participants, and we just didn't see that. And so I'm not sure, Jenny, if there are any rules on creating committees. If we can consider this a subcommittee of the council, these working group meetings, and how we could possibly do that, or if there's just other internal administrative roles we have to play. I would say the other thing would be, if we define people who are on these working groups, it would create more ownership and buy-in to the working group itself. So we wanted to bring that to the council to discuss.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I really dropped the ball on this, because I've got a good list of federal folks that I want to wrap into more, just input to the council, through me. And this would have been something I should have sent out to them. So yeah, obviously maybe it came through the Magip mail. I guess I can't remember seeing it, but yeah, sorry about that. But anyhow, the links are here, right? We could probably send this out, correct, to other people.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not too late. We're going to continue to work through this whole process. They can review each of the matrices. They can watch the Zoom recording. I think some of the past working group meetings were recorded. Those should be posted online. I can double check with those theme leads to ensure that they are posting the meeting materials.
Yeah. And I think we can probably do some surveying of people who have participated in the past and current participants to find out more information about their interests in serving and being part of these working groups, and what, if any, barriers exist that we can help them overcome.
Do you know if there's any rules to defining, say we want to have at least 10 working group members? Of course, there are always public meetings anyone can attend.
I mean, there's not necessarily any official rules. We can have kind of subcommittees of this council, for example.
Okay. And Alan and everyone else, I just wanted to reiterate, it is not too late. This is part of the process. So we were able to have for the MSDI themes go through this process. There's a link. That lower link is a link to all of their individual quality improvement matrices. The other reason why we chose to do it this way was so that, this could be at least an hour presentation for each one. And we wanted to try to keep it as brief as possible. And then they're very adamant that it would be very boring just to walk through a spreadsheet. So we're kind of having that be self-paced. And if it's something after this meeting that you want to see differently for future framework themes, when they start working on their matrices, we can certainly do that. There's no problem there.
I think one of the things that I'm interested in seeing, and I don't know how other council members would think about this, is you know, as we're completing these first 4, doing some kind of either, I'm not sure if it's a crosswalk or some way to evaluate how successfully we feel these matrices are helping us to accomplish the intent of this particular strategic business plan, and kind of where we see these matrices going, mostly to determine if there's any learning for us about the process that we're going through to make sure that we're on track to achieve the intent of these business plans. Does that make sense?
I think so. And just so everyone knows, these matrices will be used to develop the data improvement plans, and then the data improvement plans will be posted as essentially each individual theme plan. So we'll be able to create a better picture, both financially and just the amount of work that needs to be done for each of these framework themes.
So I think it's worth, after we get through this first round, to just evaluate the process we've set for ourselves to see if the process outlined is leading to the successes that we've hoped for.
This is Maureen. I just had one more comment on the working group meetings. One of the things that was kind of talked about a little bit, but it really wasn't in the notes in the working group meeting outlines, was the accessibility of this data and how important that is going forward. That, you know, the reason I think that a lot of this is, you know, being, in other words, so much work is going into this is so it is accessible and can be used by not only, you know, the state and local governments, but federal partners as well.
Are you talking about building that story for each of the frameworks, like each of the layers, to understand why it's so important?
Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yep.
That could go into the, we could make that as we were talking about creating a template for the plans, and that could be a required piece of the template for each of the theme plans.
Yeah.
Okay, unless somebody has anything else, I am done with this piece, Jenny.
Okay. Please feel free to send us any additional feedback that you might have. I'm interested in Adam as the CDO's feedback that you have, that kind of thing. So the more thoughts that we can get on this, the better.
Yeah, I love the approach. I'm definitely gonna watch after this.
Great. Okay.
Boy, we are flying through the agenda.
Let me talk a little bit about the 2025 legislative session. Then we have linked in your materials information about the one bill I want to go into some more detail on. Just sort of generally high level from the state library perspective and the GIS perspective. It was a relatively calm session for us. We ourselves weren't carrying any of our own legislation that we had to shepherd, so that was nice this session. As I think most of you know, at the direction of our commission, we didn't bring forward any budget requests through the executive planning process. So what our budget contained were largely inflationary increases that are awarded at sort of at the state level. One of the things that our budget committee did was to change the organizational structure of the state library's budget going forward. This is a little bit in the weeds, but each agency has what are called budget programs. And those budget programs sort of serve as the organizational structure for an agency. And prior to this session, the state library had always been considered one program. So if you looked at our budget, it just referred to a program called Statewide Library Services. And over the past couple of biennium, our budget chair, Chair Beatty, has pointed out the fact that that single program does not convey to the legislature and others the breadth of the work of the state library and the impact that it's having. And so it was very important for him to change that organizational structure to make the work of the state library more apparent. We started that process a couple of interims ago, just in our reporting to our budget committee. And then during this legislative session, the committee took formal action to break apart our agency into 3 programs. One is Central Services, one is our Patron and Library Services program, and then the third is GIS Data and Information Services. And so it didn't change the amount of funding that we have available to us, but it did sort of divide the funds amongst those 3 programs. So our Geospatial Information Act funds, for example, are almost all tied to that GIS Data and Information Services program. Again, the intent behind this was very well-meaning. Chair Beatty really values and supports the work of the state library, and he wanted to elevate the visibility of that work to the larger legislature. So it sort of remains to be seen what that will mean for achieving that goal going forward. It does mean some more work internally, administratively, especially for our central services staff who monitor those funds and build budgets and move funding around to allow us to operate. But that is something that I think was well-meaning, and we appreciate that the chair wanted to make that happen. We also spent about 3 days with our budget committee doing a deep dive into the work of the state library. That was something new, and it was an opportunity for us to really educate our budget committee about the nuances of our work, the impacts of our work, and how that work is funded. All of those documents that we prepared are on our website, so we can add a link to the chat if you haven't had a chance to look at those. I know I had shared out some of those documents earlier in the legislative session. We were asked to review a handful of bills that might have impacted our GIS operations or had to do with some new boundaries that were being discussed, new districts that were being discussed, etc. Really, none of those bills came to fruition, so there wasn't a lot of work for us to do to address those pieces of legislation moving forward. The one bill that I wanted to talk about is House Bill 192 that we have linked in your meeting materials. That bill was brought by the Clerks and Recorders Association, and it was carried by Representative Julie Darling. She's been the longtime chair of the House State Administration Committee. Chair Beatty and others became aware that there was a bill that was looking at the recordation fee specifically for clerks, but it opened up an opportunity for them to consider the recordation fee that funds GIS work, both at the state library and at the county level. And so Chair Beatty got with his clerk in Ravalli County and talked about the state library being included in that effort. And I was thrilled that the clerks and recorders were so receptive to including us and our funding and county GIS funding in that overall effort. It had been several decades that the clerks had gone without seeing an increase in their recordation fee. As you know, we just increased our fee just 2 sessions ago. So I didn't necessarily think it was plausible for us to consider an increase so soon after that 2021 increase. We were brought in just after the midway point in the legislative session and heard nothing but very strong support for an increase in our fee. So as is reported in your meeting materials, our fee went from $1.50 to $2.25. Counties is going from 50 cents to 75 cents. And then importantly, there is an inflationary factor that's built into the bill. The hope for that inflationary factor is that it will allow for some ability to increase that recordation fee over time without having to constantly open up the legislation to do that. And as is noted here, that will happen on a biennial basis, and it's the Department of Revenue who will be determining that inflationary increase. We, of course, don't yet know exactly how much revenue this is going to bring into the state library. We have some projections, and we want to be conservative in what those projections are. We're not projecting that it's enough for us to wholly make up for the revenue shortfalls that we've been experiencing. You might recall we cut our planned budget by about $1.5 million last year in total. That was both ongoing and one-time only appropriations. Sort of ballpark projections were $600,000 to $700,000 in revenue. With some of the market concerns, we feel like we should be proceeding with caution and not over projecting the revenue that we think might come from this. But regardless, it's a very, very positive step, and it speaks very highly to the work of the state library, to Erin and her team's coordination with the Clerks and Recorders Association, that they were willing to bring us in late in the process, and so happy to have us a part of the legislation, and then just the resounding support that we heard from the legislature. Any questions on House Bill 192, our budget, or anything else coming out of the session?
Jenny, I know this is kind of out of the scope of our committee, but I know when I was in Gallatin County and we were supposedly going to receive these funds from the recordings, it was a struggle, to put it mildly, getting those funds transferred to GIS, which is where they were intended. I'm just curious if Maureen or anybody else, Lee, maybe you guys have you had any issues at the local level trying to obtain these funds?
Alan, this is Maureen. I actually went through this with our local office here in Custer County and verified that they are on task with this and everything balanced out as far as our county.
It's good to know, Maureen.
Yeah, I'm at the city, so we don't receive these funds. That goes to the county.
I just know that, yeah, I guess just, due diligence on the county level to make sure, and Eric would probably know too, he's probably got that pretty well pegged in, but it was a struggle on our end to get that. It was typically snagged and thrown back into the general fund.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything we as a council can do, but there's going to be significant increase in funding going to the county here. And I mean, not significant, but it does add up. And they do need to make sure that they're tapping into that.
We have been asked over the years if that's something that we audit, and as you pointed out, Alan, that isn't something that we audit, but the legislation does call for there to be county GIS accounts funded with this funding. And so for anyone who's hearing or having difficulty with getting this funds, I do think that's a conversation to have with the local county clerks and county commissioners.
Jenny, this is Maureen. So just kind of dovetailing off of that, I'm wondering if there's some kind of an, informational packet that could be sent out from the libraries to the individual clerk reporters across the state so that they realize that that language says you shall collect this. I mean, that's pretty definite in that language.
That's a great idea, Maureen. I think we're happy to do that, and we can do that kind of as part of our maybe our mutual celebration of the wins that we had this session. I'm going to make a note of that.
Could be something, Jenny, that's discussed at MACR. I can talk to a couple of those clerks and recorders that are in the leadership roles.
Yeah.
Alan, I know you called out Lewis and Clark with Eric, and he is in communication with his clerk and recorder. And as far as I know, I don't think he's ever expressed any issues there to me, but I'm sure similar to your experiences in Gallatin, that there could be others that are having similar experiences. I think the other thing is there's not a GIS department in every county as well. And so that's something to be considered.
Yeah.
That I can kind of speak to that as well. This is Maureen again. And the reason why is Custer County created the position here for GIS based off of that account being funded and, sitting there unused for quite a while. And so that is actually a very good reason for them to be putting that away, because down the road, they're going to be able to have that position.
Yeah, that's a great point. As long as those funds are there and not being swept into the general fund. We'll look at our collections report shortly, but it's easy to make the direct connection to what we're collecting at the state and what then is being collected in individual counties. Any other questions or discussion about the legislative session? Any other pieces of legislation that anyone heard about that they wanted to bring to the council's attention or other discussion? Okay. I did want to talk a little bit also about just what we're hearing at the federal level and some of the impacts that have happened here at the state library. This is a update that I shared out a little bit earlier this month about our federal funding that we received through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So I want to share an update about that. And then I know Bryce Maxwell's on the call. I've asked him to share an update about some of the discussions he's having with federal agencies about the funding that funds the Natural Heritage Program and our water information system, and just some of the changes that are occurring at the federal level. Alan, obviously, if you have any input or feedback for us in the council, we welcome your input or anything that anybody else is hearing. We're all experiencing on a regular basis the executive orders that are coming out of the presidential administration impacting federal agencies and funding across the country. And on March 14th, our federal library funder, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, received an executive order directing them to reduce their operations to what was minimally required in statute. And so the Montana State Library, other state libraries, other attorneys generals, and many other folks have been trying to understand the impact of that executive order and what is in statute, what isn't in statute. About 2 weeks later, all of IMLS's staff were put on administrative leave, and most of them received layoff notices. A handful of them were brought back. We were fairly confident in early April that our federal funds through the Grants to States program were in statute. I mean, the plain reading of the federal law, they're in statute. And that's a per capita formula grant. It's not a discretionary grant. So we were fairly confident that our funds were going to persist until mid-April, when 3 states out of the blue received termination notices for their current year awards. And so all of the rest of the states anticipated that we would hear the same news. So at that point in time, we needed to take action to make some adjustments in our spending to anticipate losing about 20% of our budget going forward. Part of that decision was asking all staff to not travel, including staff that are paid out of our state general fund and our MGA dollars, as well as some of our grants and other federal agreements. While those staff, that they had external funds, having more funding available that gives us the flexibility internally to manage any kind of significant loss of funds was largely driving my decision to direct staff to not travel, and then to only spend what was absolutely necessary. There were numerous other grants were terminated in the interim. There were lawsuits filed, and ultimately, as of about a week ago, the state libraries that had their funds terminated had their funds reinstated, and we've at least received our partial award for next fiscal year, which we start to spend on July 1. And we hope that we will receive our remaining grant award by the end of this month. So it's been a very, very unsettling time here at the State Library for all of our staff, not just our IMLS funded staff. And I appreciate all of our staff's concern and patience for one another, and willingness to forego travel. Some of our GIS staff had to miss the MEGIP conference, as well as some out-of-state professional development. Some of our heritage program staff had to miss some out-of-state professional development. These are really uncertain times, as you're all aware, and I'm sure you're all feeling in your own agencies. And so we're just trying to look at the information that we have at hand and make the best decisions that we can in order to preserve the operations in the short term, and hopefully we don't have to make more dire decisions in the long run. So the good news is we do have our current year funds available to spend. We have a partial award for next year's funds and anticipate receiving the balance of that award. President Trump has called for the zeroing out of the IMLS budget in his FY26 budget. That's not unanticipated. In his first administration, he also called for those dollars to be eliminated. And so we're really looking to Congress to make sure that the funds that we receive are in fact appropriated by Congress. If they're not, then we'll have some difficult decisions to make going forward. But I wanted to share that information with you so you all have an understanding of how and why we're making decisions that impact all of our staff, including our GIS staff, even if it's not their funding that's being impacted. You saw this last year when we were making cuts across the agency in order to manage the shortfall in our MGA revenue. Bryce, do you want to share an update on the news that you're hearing, which is maybe a little bit more positive?
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm upside down. I'll just do this. Let's see if I can get that to work. Sorry, I had to some computer issues this morning, so I had to adjust my camera. There we go. That'll get us by. Yeah, I would say similar things to what Jenny said. The overarching themes being just a lot of uncertainty from our federal partners right now, and also statements from all of them about how important the information resources that are provided on the state GIS data list and here at the Montana Natural Heritage Program are to them right now. They're that much more important to them. We did have some freezes in grants that were associated with the bipartisan infrastructure law funding and the Inflation Reduction Act funding. Those have now been unfrozen. The president's budget does call for some major cuts in federal agencies that manage some natural resource species habitat databases that we depend on. We're beginning to have conversations with a variety of other heritage programs and other and NGOs across the country in terms of how to potentially deal with losses of those databases. I think, and then on the process side of things, we have our local contacts. I think the general trend is our local contacts, while they have approved funding for the upcoming year, the final approval for those is made at the DC level at this point. And so we still have some quite a bit of uncertainty on a couple of our grants for this coming fiscal year, even though they've been approved at a local level. In addition to the funding changes, I just want to highlight structural changes. And, essentially we're seeing huge layoffs in the Forest Service would be one, BLM another. As an example, for the Forest Service, there were around 15 to 20 people in the renewable resources section of the Region 1 Forest Service office in Missoula. There are only 3 of those people left at this point. Word is that regional Forest Service offices are going to be collapsed into 3 national hubs, 1 hub in the West. And word on the street is that either Missoula or Boise are in the running for that West-wide hub. What I've heard from our federal contacts is there's that the local offices, like if it's a local forest office, for instance, there have not been cuts at that level. They're expecting those staff to be left in place, and that it's more a matter of consolidation of regions and things like that, and consolidation of processes. I think a couple other things I want to say. The executive orders all call for expediting processes, environmental review processes, and also they simultaneously call for providing certainty. And I think the only way that we collectively can both expedite processes and provide certainty is do what this committee is doing, and that is providing centralized locations of information, geospatial information, and making it readily available. So I think what this committee is doing and what we all collectively do is just that much more important. And then finally, basically, I just heard that we need to start from scratch in terms of meeting our partners' information needs, because a lot of institutional knowledge has been lost. So we really need to focus on training and making sure that those partners, and they might be new people in new positions, they have the information that they need to do that expedition or expediting processes. So yeah, we're just that much more important than we already have been. So under these changes, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Bryce. I know this is sobering information. I'm just really grateful for the trust that our federal partners have put in us and the work that we do. I think that speaks very highly and gives me confidence in our abilities to go forward. But we do need to be very, very mindful of the uncertainty that we're working with, and very practical and conservative as we're thinking about how we budget going forward in the face of this kind of uncertainty.
Yeah, Jenny, I'll just weigh in just a bit from the federal side. Ours is a big roller coaster pretty much every week. There's a lot of focus on our end, which is energy independence. And so a lot of our headquarters folks are most interested in mineral rights, mineral ownership, surface management, and things like that that we manage on federal lands. And so that's been a big focus. I would say that a lot of the contracts were initially all paused, and that would include Bill and Ira type funding and anything with partners. Those are all being looked at extremely in detail. They did release some of those funding pots to be spent, and I don't know to what extent. A lot of that was mentioned a little bit, so some of that is trickling down, but it's all being very scrutinized. All expenditures and authorizations have to go up to Washington. All of our MOUs were just recently looked at. Most of those have no monetary exchange, and so I don't expect a lot of action taken there. I know we don't have one with you guys that I know of, except under the table one. But those that were signed and such, we just last week had to push all those up that we had and identify every one that exists. So somebody's going to be looking at that. I don't know what they'll do with them, but those are being looked at. Like I said, everything's being looked at in extreme detail. It's getting really hard on those of us left behind. I've had to take over management of the entire public room section, the FOIA, the records, the privacy part of what we did at the BLM. A lot of positions are being rolled up to the Department of Interior level. So from BLM, Bureau of Rec, Bureau of Indian Affairs, National Park Service, those agencies are being rolled into DOI. What's going to happen with that, we don't know. We think that they're going to, once they fill the can full of people that they've collected from all the different states and agencies, then they're going to probably offer another package to get rid of more of those. So a lot of aggregation of services, and it's just, every week we have most of us have meetings almost every day, just because there's something new coming down, almost that fast. We expected last week to hit a pretty big reduction in force that was put on pause by a court order, but that'll probably resurface again in the next week or two. All of our federal folks have to report back to an actual physical location by, I think, June 16th. So everyone who was working remote or any remote position has to be in a building, federal building someplace. So we're taking on people from a lot of other agencies here in our office as well. All details or temporary promotions have been pulled back. People are put back into their place of record at this time. So it's a lot of change. I know Forest Service, usually we hear what's happening because we hear from those guys first. Somehow it hits Department of Ag sometimes before it hits us. So we get a little bit of gossip that way. We have Forest Service people in our building as well. I know at the enterprise level, who manages our GIS enterprise at the Denver Federal Center, the Enterprise Geospatial Services, they are being rolled up to Department of Interior. So I would, everyone's kind of done their own thing. BLM did their thing, Forest Service did their thing, Park Service did their thing, on and on. Bureau of Rec, Bureau of Indian Affairs, we've all gone to different cloud implementations. We've all done different file and folder structure setups. I would suspect that somebody, I would, if I was looking at things, I would be like, why don't you guys all run off the same platform. You're all Department of Interior. Why do you all have to do it differently? So I suspect that'll probably be looked at pretty thoroughly. So yeah, every week it's a new story, but we're all still here. We say we live to die another day, and that we just try and do our best with everything that we have in front of us.
Thanks, Alan. Our thoughts are sure with you.
I think another interesting conversation that was had at the NISDIC mid-year meeting with some of the NISDIC business partners that have been in the industry for a very long time and are tuned in to Capitol Hill and go there frequently, and also at high levels of leadership in their world of things. They were discussing the importance of geospatial education and technology to national security. And so from what I've heard is we'll start to see a bigger push towards getting people tuned in and working with universities to ensure that the right people are being trained to continue the work that's being done of NOAA and geodetic control and geodesy and things like that to ensure our national security. So that was a big hit. And so at the conference in Colorado Springs past February, kind of when a lot of news was coming out for federal partners, we did have quite a few federal partners there because of just the location being in Colorado and them being able to drive. And so I just thought that that was interesting because there is a lot of major concern, especially from NISDIC, because states do partner with feds. We can't do what we do without the feds and vice versa. And so I think that that's just important, is that that message is coming out of the Capitol. So I just thought that I'd like to share that with everyone, kind of somewhat of a positive tune, even though it'll take a while, but we could see funding come to help ensure education and training.
So one other thing I think we should all be mindful of is just those federal geospatial data sets and applications. I know our staff is spending quite a bit of time looking for and monitoring access to different data sets that we rely on, and making sure that other partners within the state library are monitoring and aware of other types of federal databases so that we can be aware of any potential loss of data at the federal level. It's a lot. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Aaron, you want to give an update on the plan?
Yes, I do. Cole, can you please put the memo? Okay, thank you. All right. This is perfectly timed after Jenny's conversation. So we are behind, and there have been a lot of unknowns, including budget. And so with the mid-session miracle of House Bill 192, that put us a little behind also, and just trying to understand what that could look like moving forward. As Jenny stated, we are doing further projections, but it's really hard to plan when let's see, I described it recently. I am on a pair of roller skates on a bed of marbles. And so there's a lot going on. And so basically, we have been delayed because of the continuing revenue declines with the Geospatial Information Act, to just the general uncertainty there, the federal budget uncertainty, the legislative changes, and then supporting the MTSRM. And so we need to put the draft geospatial information plan out for public comment. I have published it for council discussion. We would like to open public comment no later than May 23rd, leave it open for 30 days, close public comment no later than June 27th, and then take action at the July 10th council meeting. The commission will meet and discuss fiscal year 2026, starting July 1, the budget, and then moving forward, the council, I think we can present a budget sometime between July and prior to the September meeting, a budget to carry out the actions of the Geospatial Information Plan for fiscal year 2026. One of the things we were talking about studying over the next few years is how to kind of a financial review and how to properly structure these plans to allow for the uncertainty with legislation and what that will look like, because we are required to publish a plan and then publish a budget that allows for us to complete that plan. And I think the word of the day is uncertainty. And because there's so much uncertainty, we want to be able to make sure we are not chasing our tails. We are able to do proper planning, and then to also pivot or make shifts when the revenue is not coming in. And then, I don't know, potentially put in safeguards and or triggers to help assist us when the funding does go low. And I think there's the other thing we had published back to the council. We had published that gap that we had done some internal numbers just to kind of do a major review of where we are at and how far behind we are on certain tasks that we consider would be fully invested in certain framework layers. An imagery program is an example. Fully collecting elevation, making sure that's publicly accessible, and then moving forward to collect more elevation for the next version. And then having elevation support elevation derived hydro. So all of this is being discussed in our working group meetings. Once we're done with this process, with the strategic plan of defining the geospatial data value, creating those matrices, creating those plans, creating a financial picture for each MSDI layer, then we can bring that back to the council and say, okay, we have this greater financial picture of where we need to be. And then we can further define that gap. So that gap is what we know now based on everything that we're doing. It is not a full in-depth analysis of what is truly needed to have an MSDI. And so I think we're going to have to explore different funding models, working with the federal government further, other types of partnerships, because right now we're not funded, nor have we ever been funded to fully support what I think we all desire the MSDI to be. And so what we've seen in our successes is our power of coordination, our power of strategic partnership building. And so we've been able to create, an elevation layer for the state of Montana based on taking advantage of certain federal partnerships and federal programs such as 3DEP. And so I don't know if the state of Montana is necessarily going to be responsible for having to collect all this information without these key partnerships from the feds, from the locals, and from the tribes. And I hope that over the next 3 years, we'll have a better picture that then we can present to our stakeholders and how to move forward with prioritizing what we are doing to further the spatial data infrastructure. So that being said, I guess I can stop there and see if there are any questions or comments or discussion.
Any questions for Aaron?
Okay, so if you want to click on that link there, Nikki, great. So if you want to go ahead, yeah, just scroll through it. So not much has changed too much with the draft. I was able, if you want to pause right there, that's fantastic. I was able to put in some of these stories about the impact of geospatial data collection, and I really appreciate Maureen and Valentine and John and Troy helping us write some of these stories. And so it's nice to have that different perspective and to get the council's perspective, but also you not only, are you council members, you're also practitioners. And so I think this will be a really nice touch to the plan itself. And if you want to continue to scroll down. Thank you. Yeah, keep going. Thank you. Okay, pause here. So it's I've taken and I have done my best to merge both some of the strategic goals and objectives that we have remaining, along with some of those other types of priorities and goals that we need to have defined in our geospatial information plan. And so you'll see a little bit of an overlap, but that's on purpose because we know that we're going to have to complete the two together. Some of these strategic goals are more internal based and I guess meant for us to do as staff. Other goals are meant for everyone to participate in and or benefit the greater geospatial community. And so I wanted to make sure that we had all this information out there and available for you to see so we can measure our successes. If you want to continue to move down. Okay, pause, sorry. Thank you, Nikki. So we have the priorities for geospatial coordination. This somewhat follows what the Land or Geospatial Information Act asks us to make sure that we're including. So we're including the goals for collection, dissemination of information, collection for geospatial priorities for geospatial coordination and priorities for grants. Okay, so you can keep scrolling in through there. And here is the grant piece. So we are looking to overall improve communication. That overlaps with what we're doing with the strategic plan. We are currently in the process of conducting that internal review of the grant program. We'll present that information and make changes based on it, and then continue to prioritize the information. I did do a short budget write-up about what's been going on, basically just trying to highlight just high level, I guess highlight the changes to what we're seeing, where we're at with the gap analysis and where we're at with funding resources. If you can continue to scroll down. Okay, that defines the changes, more gap analysis. And then if you scroll down to the end, I apologize. This was, can you hit refresh? This is like not coming up for certain. I've had issues with Adobe lately. I think the saga continues. There we go. Okay, so this was added. So if you scroll down to the very end, please. There we go. And then I think if you close that pages on the right, that little win, thank you. You'll be able to see it. This is that 5-year, basically projecting 5 years where the gaps are, what we'd like to get done, some of the major, again, this was just an internal review done with the geo info leads. presented to Evan and Jenny, basically highlighting where we think we're at with internal only. We have not looped in the external MSDI theme leads to try to better understand where we're at financially. But you can see if you scroll down to the very last, so you see those totals there. So a geospatial information program is not cheap, to say the least. And so in some of these, you know, we're talking about LE derived hydro, which is some of those bigger line items, a PLSS overall overarching plan, an imagery program. There's a lot of discussion about a Montana imagery program. We want to keep the discussion going. We want people to understand what the costs are. So when the opportunity arises in the future, we know what that looks like, and we know we're continuing to document these costs. We know that we're never going to have enough money in our current structure with the geospatial information plan to cover a Montana imagery program, but that doesn't mean we can't partner with other federal or state agencies or local government for that matter. And so we do understand that a lot of what we've highlighted in this budget is not going to come from MGIA, but the portion that we're responsible for is coordination and making sure that this information is known. And so we want to make sure that people are understanding that GIS is a high dollar industry, and a lot of the information that we do is, like Maureen had said, is super effective and impactful. It would be great to understand and continue to study the ROI of certain data layers to prove the value, or to continue to prove the value, but we also need to understand where we're going in the future, and that these continuing advancements in technology, the high demand for geospatial technology, and then of course the quick turnaround that people are now expecting. Cadastral, when we did our interviews for strategic planning 3 or 4 years ago, we were being requested to do real-time cadastral updates. We have states that only publish cadastral once a year, if they even publish it statewide. So when it comes to Montana, we're kind of ahead of the game in certain areas, and others we're a little further behind. And the overall goal is to paint this picture for everyone to understand where we're going and how we need to get there. And so Jenny, that is my end of my little mini presentation about this, and we can open it up for discussion regarding the plan.
I just wanted to make a comment on this kind of financial budget planning and gap analysis. This was something that I asked staff to focus on, in part because, you know, we've just talked about all of the uncertainty and the risks to funding, but there are often opportunities, like we saw with the COVID and ARPA funding, for large amounts of money to come in to support our work. And we want to be sort of quote unquote shovel ready with opportunities to invest those dollars when they come our way. I've talked to staff quite a bit over the last year about the lifelines that tend to come our way when we're facing challenges and uncertainty. And so I really appreciate staff's efforts to do this really careful analysis. I feel like it positions us well to communicate both the impact and cost of the work that we do. And when that next opportunity comes, I feel like we're really ready to be able to make the case for significant funding and why we need it. The other thing I wanted to mention, just in terms of the budget timing, this is always a little bit of a tricky year as we come out of a legislative session. We're still doing our budget turnarounds right now, so we weren't prepared to bring any kind of budget numbers to the council for your discussion. The commission will be looking at our overall FY26 budget at their June 13th meeting. So if you're interested in that discussion, you can tune in on June 13th. As we've talked about, we know that over the course of the next year, we'll be seeing increased revenue because of the increased recordation fee. How much we really don't have a great sense of yet, in part because just the nature of the markets right now and all of the uncertainty that we see, as we've talked about numerous times with this council, so much of that revenue is driven by the housing market. And so I know I heard on the news recently that kind of March and April were some of the worst months for the housing market since the start of the pandemic. So we're concerned about what that might mean going forward, while at the same time being optimistic that this increased revenue will give us more of a cushion than we've had in this last year. We were able to save some money this year, and we'll look at that when we look at your third quarter financial report. So we were able to sort of keep a little bit more money in the bank as a reserve, that gives us that kind of added cushion. And then we need to go back and look at some of the priorities that we had to cut last year when we were making cuts, when we're planning for our FY26 and then FY27 budgets. Some of those priorities are things like the Montana State Reference Network tech. The Montana State Reference Network has been operating with just a single operator now for a few years. We got legislative authority 2 years ago, to hire a tech, and that's a position we haven't been able to fill. Aaron mentioned that we've been having to lean on some of our other GIS staff to provide some support there. So we need to be able to focus on filling that position. We did take other cuts across the agency that we want to be able to consider when we're building our FY26 budget, and then thinking about the timing of when we reinstate the grant program. According to our administrative rules, the next time we would offer a grant program is we would open it up for an application period this coming winter and plan to award grants in FY27. That's a timing is part of that internal review that we talked about a little bit earlier. So we're thinking about how much we might be able to award and what that timing looks like for an award for next year. So that'll be some discussion that we'll have with the council, both in July and September. Part of the discussion that we've been having is wanting to open up that application period sooner. So that would be a great question for us to bring to the grant subcommittee, to get your thoughts about having a longer application period ahead of a biennial grant award. So more information to come on what our FY26 budget will be, and then hopefully over the next year, I feel like I need to knock on wood. Hopefully over the next year, we'll gain a little bit more certainty, both in terms of what this increased recordation fee means for our revenue, as well as what the federal funding picture looks like that has impact on our overall operations. Okay, any council discussion or feedback? Again, the next step for the plan is to put it out for public comment here in just a week from tomorrow, or yeah, a week from tomorrow.
I think this looks great. Thank you guys for all of your hard work in putting this together.
Thanks, Lee. Any reactions to our gap analysis, our funding gap analysis?
This is
Karen.
I just wanted to say that sorry, I didn't know if I was talking over
Go ahead,
somebody.
Maureen. I'll jump in after.
So I was looking back at the last draft, and I can tell there is a lot of work that has gone into it, and it's just so appreciated. And I know how hard it is to work with budgets, and especially when you're trying to look forward. And anytime you go even more than a year forward, you know, that analysis is so hard to do, because it's just like Jenny and everybody else has said, it's so uncertain at this point where we're gonna be financially with all levels of government. But it's just so appreciated, like Lee said, you guys have put a lot of work into this and it shows.
Thanks, Maureen.
I was just gonna say about your gap analysis and all that prioritization. That's my favorite part of the whole thing. It's I think it's really awesome and really important to show all that priorities and what we could be doing if we had that funding. And I did have one question. Nikki, would you mind scrolling up just a little bit? There's another chart that kind of summarizes some of this. That one. Nope, back down. That 5-year budget planning thing. What is the base? I'm a little confused about what that means.
Yeah, base. That is what I should change that to. Oh, that was the authority. So
Mhm.
that was, so base was our authority, our legislative authority, and collections was, so I had to put in an estimate for future
Mhm.
bases. And so I'll make sure I'll call that out and redefine that and make sure that that's better understood. So we are given a legislative authority. So this is great. I've gotten a lot better at explaining this over the years, and I'm certainly probably going to say something wrong. So Jenny, you can jump in,
Yeah,
but
and we'll look at that when we look at the financial report too, if that's
yeah.
helpful.
So we're given the authority. I have to tell this to vendors all the time. They're like, just use this pot of money. I'm like, that's not how this works. So we're given the legal authority to spend from MGIA. But if the MGIA doesn't come in, so you can start to see that gap. So the gap number one was we had the legal authority to spend the 2 million, but then the collections were about 1.18. And so if they were to come in higher, then we could have spent it or saved it, or, you know, whatever we decided to do for fiscal year 2025, and so on and so forth. And so we use some predictions here, and I do see a asterisk that estimate is based on fiscal analysis of House Bill 192. So I'm going to make sure that the base has been defined in this chart. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
And just so everyone knows, we don't know what our authority is for 28, 29 yet. That's something that we have to ask for the next legislative session. And I'll put that has been an estimate.
We should be able to update. Let's look at the authority for FY 26 and 27.
Yeah, I think when I created this, we did not have that, obviously.
Yep, so we've got that now. We can add that in. Any other feedback on the plan? It will feel very good to get to the point where we can share it for public comment and then bring it back to the council for action. So thank you. All right, let's move on to our standing reports. I want to welcome Jackson Rose. Jackson is the MEGIP Vice President, incoming president, and he's here to share the MEGIP report with us.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is my video working? I can't tell.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Good morning. I know some of you, but not everyone. So yeah, my name's Jackson Rose. I work at MSU in Bozeman in the Department of Earth Sciences, where I do GIS research and instruction. And as Jenny said, I'm technically still currently the vice president, but starting next week will be the major president. So I think I have a relatively short report today. First, just want to thank everyone on this call and with the State Library that participated in this year's Big Sky GeoCon in Helena. It was super successful. We actually haven't met as a major board since the conference wrapped up, so I don't have firm numbers. I was hoping to report some firm numbers, but I can tell you anecdotally that it was our best attended GeoCon since the pandemic. So we're super excited about that. And happy to share more information in terms of the number of speakers and attendees when we have those numbers finalized. But otherwise, yeah, just wanted to reiterate, as incoming president, MAGIP's support. We're super grateful to collaborate with the State Library. And so, this coming year, if there's anything that I can bring to the MAGIP board, where we can kind of strengthen those ties, I'd be more than willing to do so. We were obviously super grateful that House Bill 192 passed, so excited about that. The only other kind of MAGIP board news that I have is, this is kind of a transition period for us as well in the spring. So we have folks whose term on the board has ended. So we were able to fill our open positions for President, myself, Vice President, Mike Powell, who's been involved with MAGIP for a long time, many of you know. And then we were also able to fill our treasurer, secretary, and technical committee chair. So we've got a full board. They're going to get ratified officially next week. And I think that's all I have in terms of updates, but happy to answer any questions about GeoCon or anything else MAGIP related.
Thanks, Jackson. Appreciate you being here. Any questions for Jackson? It was a great conference. Thanks for your comment, Maureen.
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. I just want to highlight, I know everyone's saying how great the conference was, but I had Jackson, and I think I did tell Gail this. I had people come up to me, especially some of the folks that are not from Montana, but they do support the conference, and tell me how wonderful it was, how everything flowed so well, and how it was one of the better conferences in a while. And so big round of applause for MAGIP and then of course the committee that puts the conference on, and then of course Michelle and her team, your team from Full Scope that you hired to help run everything went really well. I know we kind of had a little bit of incident with the keynote. He fell ill during his presentation, but it was handled so beautifully. And I don't think you have a protocol for that, but you might now. And I know he's doing really well. So I think that was another thing a lot of people had questions about, but it was just such a fantastic job. So well done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess I will plug, thanks, Aaron. I guess I will plug next year's conference. It's never too early, right? So next year is in Whitefish. We have John Nelson with Esri, who's kind of many of you probably follow John on socials or have connected with him. He's kind of the cartography wizard at Esri. So he's going to be the keynote. So we're super excited about that. Obviously, we'll share more information as it gets closer, but yeah, just wanted to plug that.
Cool. Okay. Nikki, can you bring up the third quarter financial report dashboard? And I just wanted to say hello to Ashley Candich. Ashley's our accountant, and she's here to answer any of your tough questions that I can't answer. So just some things I wanted to highlight. This is, of course, through third quarter, so through March 30th. We're winding our way down to the end of the fiscal year. As I mentioned, we did have some underspending, which, given the situation we were in a year ago, is a good thing. We have the ability to leave any unspent cash in the MGA account to give us kind of more of a cushion or more of a reserve going forward. You see on this dashboard the appropriation that Aaron mentioned in that chart previously in the plan. So that 2.6 million in appropriation was a combination of one-time appropriation and then ongoing MGA appropriation in order to account for the cuts that we took and the amount that we anticipated not spending a year ago. We have that category of hollow authority. So that's sort of that difference between the appropriation that we had and a recognition that we were not going to have the cash to spend out that appropriation. And so then there's the total spending and then that balance remaining. Again, that balance remaining is authority, not necessarily cash in the account. The good news is you can see that we have started to see a little bit of an uptick in that cash balance. So that gives us some confidence going forward that we'll have a little bit more of a cushion, especially if we start to see a drop off in revenue again. Overall, the spending that you can see is either largely right on track or a little bit underspent, with the exception of just a small amount in our info products line item. The 420% overspent might be alarming to some. If look at the dollar amount, it's only about $4,500. That is from an invoice that we didn't anticipate from when we updated the cadastral application a year ago that came in after we had built that original budget. So this is our FY25 third quarter financial report. And then next we have the collections report, which I think is probably also of interest to you. But before we jump to that, is there any questions about the financial report? All right, let's go ahead and jump to that collections report then.
Okay.
And why don't we, if you could select the monthly collections tab, that's probably the most meaningful.
And then when you hover over the monthly collections, oh gosh, what's it called? That box in itself, if you go into the middle there, into the middle of up in the top right of the box, you see an expander. You have to be in the middle with your, yep, go ahead and expand that so you can see it all. There we go. And I think what I like to do is I like to turn off 20. So if you click on FY 2019, and then I would turn off 2020 and then 21 and then 22, just so you know that you guys, that you can do this. I just like to show, at least we're tracking above the last year. So Jenny, I didn't know if this is what you wanted to highlight. Yeah, so.
Exactly. You know, this gives us the clearest sense of where we are relative to the last couple of years. Obviously, 2019, that lower bar was prior to the 2021 recordation fee increase. Then we had significantly higher collections, really driven by the boom in the housing market that we saw here in Montana during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then you're all familiar with the very significant drop off that we had last year. And some of that information is reflected here. We are tracking a little bit higher overall than we were last year. But what this tells me is, while I don't want to say this level of collections is a new normal, I think it's safe to say that the need for the cuts that we put in place are pretty apparent. And we need to be planning for sort of a different amount of revenue going forward. That, of course, has been impacted by the passage of House Bill 192 and some new revenue that we anticipate. But we don't want to overestimate. We don't want to we want to be conservative in our approach, given the experience that we've gone through over the last year to 18 months, especially that since we have not seen any kind of real rebound in the collections prior to the increase in the recordation fee. Don't be alarmed by April. That just reflects the fact that we haven't received a full collections report for that month. And so, you know, we'll be obviously looking at what that looks like as we go through the remainder of this fiscal year. But I think the big takeaway for me is the significant budget reduction that we've experienced last year was necessary. There's reason to be a little bit more optimistic, but we're not seeing any kind of significant rebound. And so our budgeting should reflect that fact. And then we'll be looking to what revenues look like over the course of the next fiscal year and how that might inform our budgeting and budget priorities really going into FY27 and beyond. But learning to manage this kind of volatility in our budget is, it's very challenging, but it's very important.
I think the other thing to highlight some of your discussion then, Nikki, if you could please click on monthly recordations. The collections is the amount of money. These are the actual collections that are coming in. And I would like you to turn off, go ahead and turn those off. Actually turn 2019 back on, because I think that's when things were normal. So Jenny and I were having some discussions about this, and 2019, I think, was fairly, I think we could call some of the more normal years over the past 10 years if we don't include what happened during the pandemic. So we were kind of more on like an average at that time, but you can see that we've significantly declined in the collections that are coming in. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these budget issues. So again, the recordations are the actual number of documents being recorded, and then the monthly collections is the financial or is the amount of money tied to each of those. And so I just think that's really important to highlight, is that they are still down compared to years past.
Yep, that's a good point. And you know, had we not had the doubling of the recordation fee in 2021, the nature of our work would look very, very different.
Absolutely.
Could you go back to the map? I guess that's under probably the annual collections.
You just have to shrink it.
Okay. Oh yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Just to our earlier conversation about the county collections, you can see there some of that information by county. And again, you know, we can do a pretty good estimate of how much might be collected at the county level based on the recordations that we're seeing coming into the state. If anybody has more interest in that information. And I think this is some information that we can highlight for the clerks, as Maureen suggested, in a one-pager detailing the increase in that GIS, the county GIS collections. Is there any feedback about either the financial report or collections?
I'm glad you mentioned that about April. I was starting to really panic there. Do you have any idea when April numbers might come in?
Yeah. Can you, Nikki, can you, on the Montana Geospatial Information Act collections, the left card, you click in there and scroll down? I just want everyone to see this. So you see the last update date. So we update it usually around that time every month. I'm looking into potentially trying to update it twice a month. But if you go back to click on, you don't have to change the size, but just click on monthly collections again. and hover over April at that that point there, and you'll see so $3,000 was reported. So some county at some point reported $3,000 in the first couple days of May, and so they're the real go-getters there. But you'll just see it. They're usually about a month to 2 months behind. I've never seen numbers decrease. I only see them increase over time for as long as I've been tracking this. And so you might see a few dollars added to December or January if there's some sort of correction that's done at the local government level. And so I would say we will fully know the picture of April sometime mid-June. If not July. So it's usually about a month or 2 months behind.
Any other questions? All right, Aaron.
All right. Okay. Let me just pull stuff up here. Okay, Nikki, I'm going to share my screen. Thank you. And now this is funny. I do not. Okay, here we go. All right. Give you my updates. Okay, so here are some of the things I'd like to highlight and discuss and give you some updates on. So general accessibility, I know that's a hot topic for many of you. Some ESRI updates, strategic planning updates of the events and activities that we've been doing over the past few months and then into the future, kind of looking ahead. The MSDI working group activities, really exciting MSDI imagery update, and then MSL in the news. Jumping in there. So I was extremely impressed with this webinar that was put on by NSGIC. So NSGIC, as a reminder, is the National States Geographic Information Council. I am the representative for the state of Montana. I've been on the council ever since I've been the state coordinator, and I was extremely impressed with this webinar. I think since geo-enabled elections, it was one of the highest attended and registered for webinars that NSGIC has had. I think they had over 800 people register, and at some point during the call, I saw at least 450 people on the line, and when we watched it, I think we had at least 6 people in the room. So this has been recorded. I don't have the link to the recording yet, but I know it has been recorded. I'll try to get it out to everyone and to the greater MAGIP community because I think it was really well done. It's been something that NSGIC has been talking about for a while. There is a subgroup working on it, and this highlights the state of Minnesota's work on accessibility. And then that being said, I wanted to share with you some of their resources, and I will drop the link into the chat as well. They have several different resources out there and available to folks. So I highly recommend that you take a look. Like I said, I know this is kind of a hot topic for many folks, especially in state government and federal government. And so it's nice to see that other states have started doing this work, and then we can joyfully, mimic what they have done and not have to reinvent the wheel. We learned some really awesome information on some of the tools that already are in ArcGIS Pro, and how to utilize those tools. But like I said, I highly recommend that you take time and you watch the webinar. I think the webinar was probably about maybe 70 minutes long, because the questions went over. So again, highly recommend everyone taking a minute to taking an hour and to listen to that. And I'm going to drop this Minnesota page into the chat. Okay, so Esri updates. I think this is really important, and this impacts everyone that's using Esri software. I think everyone is probably has a pretty good understanding that there's this major shift in licensing model, and that concurrent use licensing is going away. And I have a date. So the date is March 1st, 2026, that the license manager will no longer be supported. And so essentially you can consider the ArcGIS desktop software that uses concurrent use licensing to maybe be a security risk after March 1st, 2026. So that's using that license manager. If you have a single use and you're running it from single use code, that's a little different. But the ArcGIS desktop will no longer be supported. I think it's in line with the same date, but I don't have that date in front of me. This is very this is a very big deal to state agencies that serve a lot of users, like the DNRC. They have like 500 some users, Department of Transportation, Department of Health, the state library. So DQ, FWP. So we've been working to try to understand and move to this new model, and it's been a major lift. Not only is concurrent use licensing going away, but then just the roles are changing and the costs are changing. And so it's been extremely impactful. The state is working with Esri to try to be off of the software, the concurrent use, and switch to that new model within the next fiscal year. The new viewer, contributor, creator, professional plus, professional plus, there is it's now a role-based model, so it's tied to a person. Let me open that matrix for you. Oh, actually. Sorry, here we go. So if you have not seen this oops, sorry about that. If you have not seen this matrix, I highly recommend using it when trying to understand the different licensing models. But I think most local governments are there and ready to move forward. It's some of the bigger agencies. I think it takes a lot of time and effort to get people to this new model. And I will say that some of these things were just released this past July. So we haven't had a ton of time to prepare. We didn't even know what the some of these user names and how it was going to be structured were called at that point. So I think this rolled out in June, or like maybe right before the UC last year. So it's been a major lift. We are working on it. If you, for locals, if you have questions or want to try to understand how we're moving forward as a state, I'd be happy to help answer those questions. But it's a lot. And so what Esri is pushing for and is expecting is that there'll be a shift in how the work is being done, and that you'll have more people who are leading efforts rather than creating data, and they'll take part into these sections. So it's starting to kind of carve off and say, oh, you're just collecting information or you're just entering information online. And so that's this big shift that I think our workforce is not quite ready for yet, but that's where they're potentially moving, and that's where they see the industry moving, so that you'll have a lead in a section that will be able to create all these maps and or collection tools to go out and then collect that information, rather than everyone being able to have this higher level of functionality. And one of those reasons is just cost alone, because the costs have increased greatly. So moving forward. Oh, any questions there? I feel like there's a lot. and we can discuss how the state's moving. Maybe not on this call. I certainly will be able to give high-level details, but just wanted to give this information. And I can make sure that this, again, this matrix is, the document is linked as well. It is out there. Okay, to switch gears a little, I apologize. I tried to put as much information as I could into this slide, so I didn't have to break it up into many slides. So you can see we are behind on our strategic planning goals, but I think we're continuing to move forward. So I feel like we're at a good place given all the uncertainty. And I guess one of the things I really wanted to highlight is, let's see, I think this improved communication. So number 2, so I'm gonna see if you can just see my mouse here, 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. This has been a major lift for us. And I think we underestimated the amount of time it would take. And then just some of the house cleaning that we had to get in order and for us to move to be able to fulfill these objectives and goals. One of those was just, we hit some major snags in the technology. We have officially maxed out ArcGIS Online, and we are looking to move to a premium data store in our next contract. We are testing it now, but the amount of information we are hosting in that SaaS product, because of its ability to scale up when needed if something goes viral, we thought was really important for us to make sure that our data sets are being put in AGOL. And then also just the functionality behind the hub technology that allows you to explore the hub or explore each data set and to actually go in and visually look at it, maybe ask some questions of the information before you commit to downloading it in whatever format allows you to through the tool, or to connect to a service and whatnot. I'll probably have staff do a demo at the July meeting of the hub. I did demo it recently in a state meeting, but we're not quite there yet. And so for those of you that are familiar with the hub technology, we're essentially going to build multiple hub pages for each of the MSDI, and then they're all going to be seamlessly integrated in one application where you can research all the information. So we're working hard on getting that information out there. We have to convert everything from our current technology, which is like the data list. It's a metadata that exists in a database. And we're essentially porting all that metadata and all those individual data records. We're uploading it into ArcGIS Online to serve it out, and then recreating those metadata records. So it is a pretty heavy lift, but we continue to move forward. And then, so hopefully sometime this summer, you'll start to see us rolling out the new structure of how we're going to restructure the website, and then how people are going to be able to access that information. And then the other major shift, I didn't want to quite put that we were green on 2.3 because defining the incoming communication pathways, we were so close. We have to, where we're kind of behind there is creating knowledge-based articles, because that's again, another big lift in itself. And so we use ServiceNow. It's the state's tool for tracking our support requests, and it's going well. We've also just restructured internally our staffing on how we're supporting it. And we rolled it out several weeks ago, right before I think it was in April 1. And so far, so good. Before, we had this on-call structure where all staff were required to basically answer the phone, meaning we have a general call line, answer that line, answer the emails, and not all of those emails or those phone calls were directly associated with maybe their expertise. And so it was identified that we really needed to redefine how we were structuring it, and that we were essentially spending too much time on the phone. And so we thought about what we could do to be more effective and more efficient. Number one was obviously to restructure our website, make our information easier to find, but then just understand how we're staffed and use our staff maybe better in more effectively. Some of the people who are the higher level staff that get paid more, maybe those are the ones that are answering those very specific questions, and then working with our techs, kind of more entry level staff positions that are able to help take those sometimes very easy data requests or tech support. Hand in hand with that would be also to update the knowledge base, or to create the knowledge base, so that when someone comes in and starts typing in a question to our GeoInfo support ticketing website, then those questions can be automatically answered through the ServiceNow technology. And then again, just making sure our web information is structured in a better way, so that it's less challenging to find information that was identified as a risk through this whole process. So we've restructured. We have 2 techs who are kind of like, we're calling them that triage role. Things are coming in and going to those 2 folks, and then if they can't answer it, they're working with the experts and kind of running it up the chain. So far so good. We weren't sure what kind of burden it would be staff-wise, the amount of time they'd be spending, but it's working well. So I'm very pleased with that, and glad that we were able to put that into play. And then of course, we've written up policies and procedures for backups. If anyone's interested in how we're organizing this, I'd be happy to share that with you. It is a lot of work to make sure you are doing a decent job at answering questions. We do get a lot of information requests, and that's really important for us as not only an agency that is the state library, but just to be transparency in government, and then just to do our patrons and our users well with the questions that they come with us. So really excited about that. And I think that's the one I wanted to highlight. The other would be number 4. We are continuing to move forward with those data value matrices, and basically defining the value of the MSDI and how we're going to move forward with improving data collection, and then maintaining, and then of course publishing and disseminating that information. So there's a lot of work that's being done there. We're a little behind, but again, we're continuing to move forward. And those are the ones that I wanted to highlight. I'm going to pause for questions.
Any questions for Erin? I remember when we were adopting our strategic plans, Alan reminding us to make sure that we're keeping that plan alive and moving forward. And I think you can see even in places where we may be behind, we're still using that strategic plan as a significant tool to help us continue to improve our operations and services. Nicely done.
Thank you. Okay. Switching gears. Here's some of the activities. We just like to inform the council of what we've been up to, who we've been out visiting, and where we've been spending some of our outreach efforts and coordination efforts. So we've had some 3D HP that's basically working to create a new hydro model for the state of Montana and the nation. We've been working there with, there's a Gallatin Water Collaborative, and we're hopeful that they'll be able to put in a project. If you're interested, please let Troy Blanford or myself know. We can get you connected. Essentially, we need funding partners there in order to get the certain HUCs digitized to the new model. Just kind of a reminder, the NHD, the National Hydrography Dataset, was put on pause for any updates several years ago. And this is the new method of creating and using the hydro, the national hydro or the 3DHP data set for the future. We are, I would say, a little behind. We are closely working with the USGS, our liaison, Elaine. And so we are welcoming partnerships. If you know of anyone that's interested and does have funding available for collaborating with us, we'd be happy to help coordinate that. We had several PSAP visits back in January and March. So here we get into the alphabet soup. PSAP is public safety answering point. Those are usually those folks that are taking the 911 calls, and they were tied in with geo-enabled elections because the data sets are so closely tied together, meaning addresses. You need really good addresses to do next gen and geo-enabled elections. We had the Marls conference, and we offered a hands-on workshop that was very well attended. That was requested on behalf of the the Marls board, I believe, and that was in Billings in February. Mako Midwinter Conference, that was another really great conference. It was here in February. It's always in Helena when there's a legislative session, just if you needed to know for future planning purposes. I attended the NISJIC mid-year meeting that was in Colorado Springs, and I was able to present with Garrett Couch. He is the president of the National Tribal GIS Center, and worked on how we are addressing tribal coordination nationally and how we address it internally for the state of Montana. And then, of course, we had Big Sky GeoCon. We did a lot of updates. I think we only have 2 updates here, but there were certainly more presentations by the state library. Those are the ones that got added. And then I was able to present to the Montana Data Summit. That's a semi-annual, I believe, event that Adam Carpenter and his group hosts, and that was really nice and well received. And I've had a lot of questions following up since then. That's basically our data community for state government. And then future activities that we've got coming up in the next quarter-ish, I should say, is we've got some potential geo-enabled elections visits, some outreach that we need to do, potential next-gen 911 visits, hopefully get out and interview some folks and have some in-person conversations for our internal grant review. We've got our council meeting July. The UC is July 14th through the 18th. I'm looking to try to attend. I've been asked to present at the GIS Manager Summit, which is that Sunday. Highly recommend that event. It was pretty impactful event I went to last year. And then looking to have some state coordination with tribal coordination with NISJIC and NTGISC. So my colleagues at NISJIC, and then also our colleagues at the NTGISC. And there's probably a couple other type of coordination events that will happen at the UC. We've got MACR, which is the Clerks and Recorders Conference in August, where we continue to strengthen our relationships. We'll probably celebrate House Bill 192. We'll discuss elections and other similar projects that we've got going on. It's also our time to kind of have like a doctor's office, quote unquote, where you basically, have some of the tech people there that are able to answer pretty technical questions like Caroline Pisaltis or Megan Burns. And I'll probably give like high level updates to the clerks and recorders and election administrators. And then the NISJIC annual conference will be in Nashville. Switching gears to MSDI working groups, really excited to see these working groups invigorated and meeting again. And if you have not had one yet this year, I will be coming for you. We will be getting these organized. Our goal is to have each of the MSDI theme leads host a working group, explain what we're doing, start working on their data matrices, and pull from their communities in order to meet the goals that we have set. So we had cadastral, mapping control, elevation, and hydrography, which coincide with those lightning talks. So those lightning talks were given after each of these were completed, and it kind of reviews everything that has been done to date. And then hopefully within the next couple weeks, you'll see a structures and address working group announced and scheduled, and then imagery, because there is a lot to talk about imagery, which is a great segue. So imagery was prioritized by the USDA for 2025. So even though we're seeing a lot of things halted and things paused, this is still moving forward. We are working internally to make sure that we have the architecture and staff time to process the imagery and then make sure it's put up in all the multiple ways that we do, make it publicly accessible. And then Hexagon was awarded the contract. That is important with the next information that I will give to you. So I don't know if you've seen this slide, but this shows all the states that have been prioritized. So this is always projected. They kind of always use this type of language. But I will say that it is moving forward. And unless something major happens, we'll probably be hearing about it. They might have already started. No, probably not with our weather. I think it's coming up in the next few weeks where the data will start being collected. Fingers crossed that they'll have enough time between cloud cover, smoke, and snow to get the full state collected this year. I think we've only had like one full state collect in the past few years because they've been split because of just forest fires not enabling us to collect and or early snowfall. So the exciting news that I'm going to share with you today is that Montana has been prioritized for 30 centimeter. We have never been prioritized for 30 centimeter imagery. And so everyone was telling me this in emails and or through phone calls, but I couldn't find anything that highlighted this. And so I had asked Hexagon to please document it for me. So they wrote me this letter. I'm going to distribute this to folks. So this is a really big deal. It's a big deal for many reasons. We're going to have really awesome imagery statewide. We're going to have 1 foot imagery statewide. We have not had that before. It also is a big deal because I think it multiplies the amount of space needed. So I think, so for planning purposes, we're going to have to make sure our architecture can handle 3 times the amount of storage. And then the other thing that they're going to offer, and it's very last minute, and I've been trying to understand how this business model works because we were not prepared to announce this. And I don't think anybody had heard that we were even going to get close to 30 centimeters. We've always been prioritized with 60 centimeter in the past. So that's 2 feet. But if you are able, again, we don't have an imagery program in place, but if you are able to, as a local government, they are looking for people who are interested in upgrading to 15 centimeter data. So that's 6 inches. So you can work directly with Hexagon to, if you have funding available, it could be state, it could be tribal, it could be local government, could be, I guess it could be private, but they will essentially work with you. They want to know as soon as possible. I was hoping to schedule a very quick turnaround meeting next week with some higher level managers in local government and basically get this contact Rob. He was at the imagery summit, supported the imagery summit that we had here a few years ago. So some of you may have met him, but I know this is a big ask because they want to know as soon as possible. But there is, if you have end of year spending, if that's a thing for local governments, but if you have any kind of funding set aside, you can work with Hexagon and they can fly the 15 centimeter. Why that's amazing for the state, because we will also get delivered that information as well. So I'm gonna let everyone know about this, and hopefully maybe someone will take advantage of it. I would expect it to be the larger cities and the folks that have the high growth in their communities. I'm gonna pause there and ask if there's any questions. Okay. We please look for an invite next week. I'll probably put a greater statement out to the MAGIP community, and I'll try to CC the entire council so that you can hear the discussions going on and the imagery working group members. But I'm just trying to get this information out as quickly as possible so that if someone is interested, that they can do that buy up of the 15 centimeter imagery. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight some articles that were written in some national news sites and or national organizations. So we've had two. I'll drop, these are linked, but I also dropped those in the chat as well. But basically we were highlighted. We worked with Esri and Langen to write an article about our cadastral rollout. It was a little late, and I really am appreciative of Kenny Kettner helping craft this with myself and then the folks from Langen. So it's really nice to get the national highlights. We've already been contacted several times because of this article, and then just kind of proves our national leadership in cadastral. And then finally, some of the leadership that we've done with LiDAR and what we've been able to do with a little bit of money, but a lot of hard work when it comes to coordination. And so Jordan is he's the 3DEP program manager for NISJIC, and he is working to create state profiles, and he had interviewed a few of us and wrote a really nice article. And it's part of a greater, it's a story map, but it's part of a greater basically review of each state and where they're at. And so I thought it was a very nice, nicely written article that Troy and Megan Burns and myself were able to give feedback on, and we were of course interviewed on. So really exciting. This is part of our strategic plan, is to highlight our good, the good news that we have going on, and to make sure that we are getting that out there. And so that check the box for attaining our strategic goals there as well. And that is the end of my report.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, any feedback for Erin? Any GIS related activities you think we should be aware of that maybe Erin didn't highlight? Are there any business or announcements from any council members? Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment? Okay, hearing none, we can go ahead and adjourn. And again, our next meeting is July 10th. So we'll look forward to seeing many of you then. Thanks, everyone.